Okay, so we're going to talk about my beginnings in the martial arts, or let's say the art of self-defense, the science of self-defense, my desire to defend myself. It began very early in my life, and this is my third shot at this video. I didn't realize it'd be so emotional, but it's pretty rough. The first part of my journey into it, my motivation, my purpose, as I should say, is pretty rough, but I want to be authentic and truthful, and we're going to get it out so that you can understand where I'm coming from as a uh, as a fighter and as a teacher of the science of self-defense. When I was 8 years old, I started parochial school, Catholic school in Hollywood, California, Blessed Sacrament on Sunset Boulevard, first grade. And my first day of school, we walked there, my sister and I, she was 3 years older. My first day of school, as soon as she left me to be with her friends, I was looking around the courtyard and there was this great commotion before class actually started. And all these kids were running to this area. And so I went with everybody. And I had to wade my way through the crowd. And in the middle of this crowd that was all excited, they'd made a circle of people. And these two little guys, they were either my grade or the grade up from me. They were squared up in boxing stances and they were going to fight. And the whole crowd was chanting. Now, this next part is tough. um, the whole crowd was chanting this horrible racist, that one of these kids was African American, one of these kids was white, and the crowd was shouting. Now I'm not going to drop the N bomb, but keep in mind that back then there was no such thing as the N bomb. There was only the word, and my father had taught me that the word was wrong, and these kids were chanting, a fight, an N bomb and a white, a fight, an N bomb and a white. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe, and I thought to myself, that poor kid, he's got to fight two fights right now. He's got to fight that other antagonist or the other protagonist in this pugilistic endeavor, and he's got to fight the fucking hatred of that crowd. And I don't know if they, in retrospect, I don't know if they knew what they were saying. They were children, but they were repeating what they had heard and they had no problem with it. And it sucked. And it wasn't personal, but I took it very personally. So, flash forward to the end of that day. I am uh, doing what I always do at the end of the school day. I'm reading a comic book on the front porch. Now, we lived in kind of a lane of bungalows in Hollywood, California, on Cahuenga Boulevard, and my family was in the back bungalow, 1244 Cahuenga Boulevard. I had to know that early because we walked everywhere, and if I got lost, I could say I lived at 1244 Cahuenga Boulevard. So, I was reading a comic book, and the young woman who lived about four bungalows up, we called her Miriam Milwaukee. She was a young Chinese woman. She was unmarried, somewhere in her late 20s, early 30s, and I know that wasn't her name. We were just butchering her name, and she was accepting it. Many Asian people I know have adopted a westernized name simply because they just hate the way Western people butcher their real names. And she may have been Milwaukee or something similar to that, but we called her Miriam Milwaukee. And she saw me and she said, "Oh, you like comic books. What do you think of the Green Hornet?" And I said, "Oh, I've never read that one." She said, "Oh, that's a TV show now. If you'd like to see it, I'll ask your parents if it's okay for you to come over to my house on Friday." And so she did. We were all very close, kind of, as I say, there were maybe 10 bungalows inside of this gated bungalow lane. And so she came over and asked my father. My father said it would be okay. Friday night, I went over to her house and I sat cross-legged in front of her little TV. And she pointed my face at the picture of the screen. And she said, "That's Bruce Lee. He plays Kato, the Green Hornet's bodyguard." There was a little bias there, but ultimately I came to find out, yeah, he kind of is the Green Hornet's bodyguard. um, and she said, "He does Kung Fu." And I watched this little Chinese guy kicking the shit out of every one of those kids in that crowd. Superman had the tagline, "Truth, justice, and the American way." And the Green Hornet, it was protecting the rights and lives of decent citizens. The Green Hornet with his faithful sidekick Kato, protecting the rights and lives of decent citizens. I knew that it wasn't decent what they did. And so I wanted that. I wanted to be able to protect at least my right to be a decent citizen. And so my very next birthday, my father asked me, what do you want for your birthday? As I was coming around, I said, Kung Fu lessons. He said, is that cooking? I said, no, it's like karate, but Chinese. That's all I knew about it at the time. And of course, there was none. And by the time I turned, you know, my birthday came and passed, and Christmas came and passed, and we didn't see any Kung Fu studios. I was bugging for it. And then there were a few. Art Wong, but he didn't have any white students at the time. And Kam Yan and Jimmy Woo was just starting to get into town. But, so we looked around, and then one day we're at the ranch market, and right across the street, had a sign that said Irish martial arts, but it was yin and yang. I said, well, that's cool. I saw yin yang, but I didn't think of Irish martial arts. Like, what are they, teaching the Claymore or something? But I went over there, and what it was these two Irish brothers that had studied with Kam Yan and Art Wong, and had just gotten introduced to Jimmy Woo, and they really were into his kind of concept of self-defense, Sun Tzu. And so I started studying with them. And it was basically Southern Chinese 5-animal Kung Fu. And there were no children. Actually, let me go back. I really didn't start. I started studying them for a while because my dad said I could have that for my 9th birthday. And, or it was past my birthday, so for the Christmas of my 9th year. But Dennis and Sean said, we don't have any kids classes. And I said, I'll study with grown-ups. And they said, well, we'll see. And they invited me to come and watch the class until I turned 10. And so I watched the class for almost, I guess, 6 months. I would just go and watch. And I would go to my grandfather's, and I'd walk around the corner from around Fountain there in Selma in Hollywood, and I would watch the Kung Fu people, and I would just be amazed, and I would just be so hungry for it. And then when I turned 10, they let me join for $2 a class. For $2 a class, I would put in a little Buddha jar, and that's another story. That Buddha jar taught me something very, very important about the difference between charity and compassion. But in any case, so I studied with them for close to 3 years till that Kung Fu Kun shut down. And I did everything the grown-ups did, and never saw another child in there except for the son of one of the 2 teachers who was about 2 years older than me. But I did it, and I loved it. I would ask them, when can I spar? When can I spar? And they would just laugh at me. And one time they showed me, they said, really? And he called one of the students and he goes, let's spar. And I can't even describe to you. I didn't see anything that was even akin to that until, again, I got into Kyokushinkai. And then I saw very similarities in that way that sparring was. But the closest I got to sparring with them was they did kind of a full contact soccer with a medicine ball. And right at the end, when I was right before I turned 13, they were letting me get in there with the gang and play that game a little bit. And that was because we trained on concrete. They never put carpet down, they never put mats down. In fact, there was like a terrazzo concrete, and they would put dancers wax down on it. So it was very slick. And if you couldn't afford to buy Kung Fu shoes, which I couldn't, they allowed me to wear moccasins, which we go to Tijuana. So I would wear Indian moccasins, which were very much similar on the bottom to the boxing shoes of the day. But so you really had to hold your legs tight together. In any case, that's how my journey began. And later on, we'll continue with it. If you watched this all the way through, thank you. And if you didn't, I understand. Keep training, my friends.